Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere opulent, bewildering, and absolutely exhausting. The imperial court of ancient China, just before sunrise. You're not there as an honored guest. No, you're a minor official, lucky to have been invited at all, though after tonight you may question your luck entirely. You shuffle through the dark, the air thick with incense from temples already awake. Your shoes tap against smooth flagstones, polished by centuries of courtly footfall. The silence is heavy. Even the wind seems like it's holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a gong sounds low and slow your signal. This isn't a buffet. This is survival theater. And you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun hasn't risen yet, and still the outer gates of the Forbidden City stir with orchestrated life. You arrive on foot. No horses pass the fifth gate unless you're wearing a hat taller than your ego, which you aren't. There are rules to your arrival. Rules upon rules, stitched into other rules. First, your feet must not move too fast. Elegant haste, the official phrase reads. You must not look up too early, nor should you walk directly in the center of the path. That path is metaphorically reserved for someone whose name you shouldn't say out loud. Let's just call him the boss. And your hands, yes, even your hands must clasp exactly as prescribed, left hand over right if you're under third rank and reversed if you're above. You forget which one you are. You panic. You switch mid-stride. A court eunuch narrows his eyes. The sky slowly bruises violet as you reach the inspection queue. A man whose job title is literally Silk Observer glances at your robe to make sure no colors are smudged. You've spent an hour steaming the front pleats of your outer robe, a dark green panel stitched with clouds and what might be a goose, but might also be a very sick phoenix. Whatever it is, it's not angry enough to get you expelled. Next, a scribe checks your invitation against a list. He doesn't look up. He just mutters, "Proceed like a man who's memorized 10,000 names and resents all of them." You pass through a red gate carved with 9 golden dragons. The breath you take is slow calculated. In, out. That's 2. You only get 6 before the next checkpoint. A scholar once described this entire entry process as a stage play, where everyone forgets the script but pretends they know it by heart. That scholar later retired after complimenting the Empress's hairpin too directly. You're now in the second courtyard. The stone beneath your feet is known to retain warmth for hours, so they say. Right now, it's cold enough to question your life choices. Servants glide past, carrying trays, not of food, but of regulation documents. One drops a scroll. 3 others rush to help, but none of them touch it. Instead, they kneel and look at it respectfully until the scroll is picked up by the scroll master. Historians still argue whether that's exaggerated. But considering there was once a position titled Assistant to the Imperial Napkin Folder, you have your doubts. Birdsong begins. A distant flute plays something haunting and slow, each note trailing through the corridors like incense. A boy with a face like carved jade offers you a towel. It's warm. It smells faintly of osmanthus. You dab your forehead once, no more than once, and hand it back with both hands. The boy bows so deeply, his hair grazes his knees. You nod awkwardly and immediately question whether the angle was correct. The first rays of sunlight creep over the roof tiles of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. It glows like a dragon exhaling. That's your cue. The final gate awaits, the gate of banquet harmony. Here you wait. There's a rule, of course, there is, that no guest may enter the hall until the bell of fortunate steam has rung 3 times. Not 2, not 4. 3. A single slip in timing could mean a delayed banquet, which means someone will be demoted to goose-feather archivist. While waiting, you examine your sleeves. The embroidery depicts a lotus pond, but one leaf curls upward, an omen, or just bad stitching. You consider asking a passing monk for interpretation, but he vanishes too fast, like all monks do when omens are involved. Finally, the bell rings. Once, twice, thrice, the doors open. 10 eunuchs step forward in silent unison, each holding a candle despite the rising sun. The candles are not lit. They never are. They're just symbolic of what scholars still debate. Some say purity, others say budget cuts. You step inside and everything changes. The air is heavier, perfumed with something floral and sweet, but also musky like the breath of a very expensive dragon. The floor is polished jade. Each step echoes back as if the building wants to memorize your walk. And ahead, lined in perfect rows, are the mats. Thin cushions, embroidered with clouds and virtue slogans. Your spot is the 11th, on the 3rd tier, not too close to power, not too far to be forgotten. A political purgatory, really. You take your place. You sit. And now, the real rules begin. Your knees crack a little as you kneel onto the embroidered cushion. Quietly you hope. The man to your left doesn't flinch. The woman to your right doesn't blink. They've done this hundreds of times. You're just trying not to collapse, face first into your own robes. Now that you're seated, it's time to assess your robe. More specifically, your rank robe. Because here, in the swirling formal theater of ancient Chinese court banquets, what you wear speaks louder than your words ever could. And heaven help you if your dragon has one too many claws. You look down. Your outer robe is a dusky blue embroidered with a modest goose and a scattering of clouds. You think you got it right. You hope you got it right. You triple-checked the hierarchy of decorative bird scroll last night. In your case, the goose means your lower official class, but still invited. A phoenix would have been presumptuous, a crane too lofty, a duck insulting. That one time, someone showed up in a robe stitched with two tigers chasing each other around a peach tree. Yeah, we don't talk about him anymore. The rules are precise. Certain colors are exclusive to the emperor and his direct line, namely a glowing yellow, so bright it makes your eyes water. Wear it by accident and suddenly you're not just out of the banquet, you're probably out of your career. Maybe your limbs, too. Historians still argue whether robe violations were enforced with prison time or polite banishment. One source describes a noble being relocated to a mountain retreat, which may or may not have involved armed guards and no roof. It's not just color. It's everything. Embroidery, themes, sleeve length, hem, width, even the number of buttons. Officials above 6th rank may wear 9 buttons, but 7th rankers only get 7. You once heard about a guy who added an extra button to impress a concubine. He ended up translating tax scrolls in Mongolia. You glance across the hall. There's a dazzling display of fashion codes at work, red robes lined with peonies, midnight black ones gleaming with thread-thin silver serpents, pale jade tunics with near-invisible clouds, embroidered only for those who know where to look. And then there are the accessories. Hair pieces for women must not exceed 2 inches in vertical height unless attending under imperial decree. Fans may be held, but only ivory or sandalwood, never both. Jade belt ornaments must align with your zodiac and your office of appointment. If you're a year of the dog, holding a tiger symbol pendant, you've just declared war on fashion and harmony. You try not to panic. A eunuch floats past his shoes making no sound. His job is to spot violations, not with malice, just duty. He pauses near the 3rd row. A noblewoman's sash is slightly off-center. He gently reaches down, reties it, and glides away. You breathe, because robes are everything, and your entire social standing is stitched into your shoulder seams. The real tragedy, the robes itch, not the expensive ones. Theirs are lined with cloud-soft silk and stitched by artisans who've never known poverty or sleep. But yours feels like it was tailored by a man who actively dislikes skin. You shift, you smile, you try to look serene and enlightened, like someone who understands Confucianism and how to sit still for 5 hours. And you realize something awful. You forgot your sleeve fold. Every official must fold their outer sleeve inward during the wait. It's part of the respectful stillness code, last updated sometime during the Song Dynasty. You quickly tuck your sleeve just as another official turns to look. You nod. He nods back. Truce. This quiet surveillance of everyone's garments goes on for 30 minutes. No one speaks. The court musicians haven't started. The emperor hasn't arrived. You're all just kneeling in mutual anxiety and textile comparison. One woman across from you has a gold thread dragon with eyes made of sapphires. You're told those were once real eyes from a statue, thankfully. Still, you can't help but feel her robe is watching you. Fun fact, There was once a court tailor who created a robe so breathtaking that the empress had it confiscated, and the tailor was sent to live with monks. For his own safety, of course. Naturally, he continued sewing for the monks. So yes, your robe matters. It's a speech, a resume, a shield, and occasionally a trap. Wear it well, and you blend in. Misstep, and your dinner party gossip for 3 dynasties. But of course, your rank is not just sewn, it's lived. You're expected to embody your placement in the hierarchy. That means no excessive movement, no excessive facial expressions, definitely no excessive breathing. You sit straighter. You refold your sleeve again, just in case. And you wait. At last, music starts. It's a gentle plucking of the pipa, followed by a flute that sounds like someone weeping under a willow. The banquet is about to begin, you think. A eunuch, with hands like paper fans, approaches the front of the hall. In his palm is a scroll, longer than your average canoe. He unrolls it. The rustling fills the space like wind through bamboo, and he begins to read the list of titles, not the names, just the titles. There are more than 140 this evening. You've heard this takes between 12 and 17 minutes, depending on wind humidity. And for each title announced, the person in question must do nothing, absolutely nothing. But everyone else must give a respectful eye lower for exactly 3 seconds. You're halfway through the list when a small yawn tries to escape. You strangle it. You cannot yawn during the announcement of the Minister of Ritual Salt Assessment. Somewhere around Deputy Archivist for Coastal Tax Grain, you feel a sneeze coming on. You think about your ancestors. You think about death. It passes. The titles finish. Silence again. The emperor is near. You do not look. Not yet. That's another robe-level mistake. The moment arrives. You hear it before you see it, the whisper of many silken layers brushing against the stone. The soft clink of ceremonial jade beads tapping rhythmically against one another, and the sharp, deliberate exhale of 100 courtiers holding their collective breath. The emperor is entering the hall. You do not look up. You do not tilt your head. You do not breathe too deeply. Instead, you focus on the floor, the exact jade tile in front of you. It has a crack in it, tiny hairline like a flaw in a pearl. And yet, that minuscule fracture is now the most sacred object you've ever laid eyes on. Because looking anywhere else right now could end very, very badly. Once the procession has passed your peripheral vision, you're permitted barely to glance up ever so slightly like a curious turtle. The emperor has taken his seat on the raised dais. He does not speak. He does not blink. Honestly, you're not entirely sure he's even real from this distance. He could be a very convincing wax sculpture, and no one would dare say a word. Now that the imperial presence has settled, a new issue emerges. You have to pee. You shouldn't. You went before leaving home. Twice. You even skipped morning tea just to be safe. But something about the silence, the endless standing, the weight of your robe pressing gently against your bladder, it all conspires against you. But of course there are rules. You may not leave during the emperor's entrance. You may not leave once food has been placed in the hall. You may not leave during ritual music. And you may absolutely not leave if anyone above you in rank is still seated. So, basically, you're stuck. Historians still argue whether court banquets included pee breaks. Some say servants discreetly offered chamber pots behind screens for high officials. Others insist that once you were in until the final toast or unconsciousness, whichever came first. You begin counting the floor tiles to distract yourself. But then, mercifully, another eunuch glides forward, holding a tray. On it, a wooden plaque with tiny characters written in crimson ink. You recognize it. It's the bladder exemption pass. He surveys the crowd like a hawk in silk slippers, and then he chooses someone else. You sigh, quietly, inwardly, with dignity. But you are allowed one last chance. It is now officially the designated urinary interval, an 8-minute window in which guests of mid-tier status may be excused one at a time in order of the zodiac. You are a year of the goat. They're on rooster. You're doomed. And still the procession continues. The banquet coordinator, yes, that's a real title, steps forward and begins the purification overture. This involves the lighting of 3 types of incense: sandalwood for clarity, agar wood for sincerity, and dried lotus root for digestive readiness. You still cannot eat. This is merely preparation. Because before the first tray of food is carried in, there is yet another ritual, the cleansing of the hall. 12 maidens, each dressed in robes representing one of the zodiac animals, slowly sweep through the room, not with brooms, but with feathers. Long peacock plumes, dipped in blessed water from the yellow river. They're not cleaning dust. They're cleaning energy. One of them passes by you. She brushes the air beside your shoulder with her feather. You shiver. Maybe from nerves. Maybe from superstition. Or maybe because this whole event feels less like a meal and more like a divinely scripted fever dream. And still, you may not eat. Now the latrine master appears. Oh yes, that's another title. His role, to oversee all restroom-related etiquette before the meal. He carries a rod adorned with small bells. If you hear a bell ring once, it means someone has requested an exit. If it rings twice, a blockage in the corridor must be cleared. If it rings 3 times, someone has broken the protocol and may not be returning. You listen intently. 1 ring, then silence. You envy them. The designated path to the latrines is an art in itself. You must walk diagonally, not in a straight line so as not to disturb the direction of chi. At each corner of the corridor, you bow once to the empty space. You also must not look at anyone else using the facilities. That would be vulgar. It's unclear what happens if you sneeze in the latrine. There's no formal guideline, which makes it all the more terrifying. You do not get up. You endure. A fringe detail that often gets overlooked. The latrine itself had its own attendant not to clean, but to hold your hat while you relieved yourself. Apparently, imperial hats had elaborate structures that made sitting complicated. The hat holder stands by the door with gloved hands and a distant stare. No one speaks to him. He's seen things. Back in the hall, the music has shifted, a deeper, richer tone. A slow gong, followed by the faint plink of dulcimers. You've passed the point of no return. The incense is fading, the air getting warmer with the breath of so many bodies, and your stomach growls just loud enough to make you wonder if anyone heard. But before food is served, one final act. A small bronze censer is brought forward and placed in the center of the hall. From it rises smoke said to ward off evil, bad digestion, and impure thoughts. The hall of supreme harmony is now spiritually sealed. No one may enter. No one may leave. You've made it. Congratulations. You're now officially ready to be allowed to think about food. Kind of. But first, you must survive the walk of placement. You're seated. You're still. You're vaguely hungry and moderately terrified. And now you're summoned to walk. Because as absurd as it sounds, even the way you get from your cushion to the banquet table is governed by enough regulation to make modern air traffic control look like playground hopscotch. Welcome to the walk of placement. A bell rings a low resonant chime that signals it's time for selected ranks to rise. You are not one of them. You're in the third wave. You get to watch the first two groups perform the slowest parade known to humankind. The highest-ranking officials rise first, not all at once, in pairs, 2 by 2, each pair exactly 3 seconds apart. They walk side by side, never ahead, never behind, like synchronized ducks in embroidered robes. Their steps are measured, 3 heartbeats per footfall. Left foot first. Right foot must follow no more than half a second later. Anyone who drags their heel, scandal, a shuffle, catastrophe, a cough. You don't even want to know. Your turn comes. You rise with as much grace as your tingling legs allow, knees cracking gently like twigs beneath snow. You smile, as if your joints aren't betraying you. You lower your gaze, not down, not straight ahead, but diagonally toward the floor in front of you. And you walk, slowly, deliberately, 1 foot forward. Breathe. 1 foot forward. Breathe. You approach the first dragon tile. These are large jade slabs, etched with mythical creatures, placed along the path, not just for decoration, but to test whether guests remember not to step on the dragon's head. That's reserved for royalty. You hesitate for half a second, then veer slightly left. Safe. One time, a visiting diplomat from a northern province stepped squarely on a phoenix's beak. The empress smiled. He was never invited back. You pass between columns painted in cinnabar and gold, each column topped with a carved beast, tiger crane keelan. They watch you. Or maybe you're imagining that. Ahead, the banquet tables stretch in two perfect lines. They're low to the ground, lacquered to a shine, and already set with empty dishes. The dishes are symbolic, not yet filled, but they're arranged according to a logic only described in ancient manuals, with names like the Harmonious Scroll of Dish Protocols, Volume 7. Your seat is marked with a tiny jade token. You kneel beside it, but do not sit yet. No one does. Not until the placing official gives the cue. He arrives in silence. An older man in white, his sleeves so long they sway like soft flags. He carries a rod with 6 bronze rings hanging from the end. He raises it. The rings clink. You sit. Everyone sits. A second later, exactly 216 servants enter the hall. Yes, 216. That's the standard staff-to-guest ratio at a banquet of this level. Historians still argue whether this was practical or pure theater. Some say the abundance of staff was a display of imperial might. Others argue it was about precision. Each servant had exactly one task, and performing 2 was considered vulgar multitasking. Each servant carries a single object, a cloth napkin, a spoon, a teacup, a pickled plum. Yours brings a small ceramic dish filled with 3 lotus petals soaked in what smells like rain and honeysuckle. You look at them. You do not touch them. A young man to your right made the mistake once of lifting a petal to his nose. The servant next to him gave such a sharp inhale that the entire row stiffened like startled cats. He apologized twice, in verse. The walk itself may be done, but the judgment is not. Now comes the eyeline test. The emperor has begun to look across the room, not quite at anyone, more, through them. His gaze hovers like smoke, slow and deliberate. Every guest must lower their eyes exactly as his gaze passes their general vicinity, not before, not after. Exactly. You're sweating now. The man next to you flinches. Too early. His eye met the emperor's for half a heartbeat. A eunuch steps forward, says nothing, just places a scroll beside his mat. That's never good. You pretend not to notice. And you wonder what happens if you look at the emperor accidentally while he's mid-toast. Are you dragged away? Assigned to plum vinegar duty, reincarnated as a ceremonial incense burner? The answer isn't clear, because nobody who's made that mistake has ever told the story. One fringe detail: the court once trained a parrot to squawk whenever someone looked up at the wrong time. Down, it would screech. Wrong. Eventually, the parrot got promoted. That part might be exaggerated. You stare calmly ahead. The emperor shifts. He raises a hand. The room goes still. And then finally, he nods. It begins. The first wave of servers enter with actual food, not just symbolic petals or metaphorical pickles. Real dishes, steam curling upward, in delicate trails, each tray carried by two servants, walking in perfect sync, like monks carrying sacred relics. But even here, you must not touch the food yet. First, you must acknowledge it. How? A soft bow, palms together, tilt your head, smile, not too wide, just enough to show the emperor that yes, you are deeply spiritually grateful for the boiled turnip with abalone essence that has graced your lacquered tray. And that is how you arrive at your place without offense, without injury, without stepping on a dragon's face. You're still hungry. You're still terrified. And you're just getting started. Your knees are tucked beneath you. Your robe has been carefully adjusted so it pools in elegant folds rather than wrinkling like laundry. The tray before you gleams, the dishes arranged like art objects rather than anything meant to be eaten. The food is real, but it also isn't. Because here in the court of the emperor, where you sit, means everything, and sitting in the wrong place, that's not just a breach of etiquette. That's practically an act of treason, wrapped in dumpling dough. You're on the outer left row, 3 seat 11. You've memorized your position, practiced it the night before by marking your floor with chalk and counting steps. Because if you sit even one mat too close to someone more powerful, you're not seen as ambitious. You're seen as dangerous. Even worse, arrogant. Even worse than that, clueless. Historians still argue whether seating charts at imperial banquets were ever flexible. The records suggest they weren't. One misplaced noble in the Tang dynasty caused such a rift that two entire ministries refused to speak to each other for a decade. Over a chair. A very nice chair, granted, but still. Each mat here corresponds to rank family history, recent contributions to the state, personal favor, horoscope compatibility, and rumor has it, the quality of your most recent calligraphy scroll. There's a chart, a very large one, probably created by someone who enjoys suffering. Your place, respectable, if forgettable. You're not on the lowest tier, where the rice comes cold and the soup a bit thin, but you're nowhere near the golden semicircle where the dishes shimmer with gold leaf and metaphors. That circle, that's reserved for the great eight. 8 officials, so close to the emperor, they might as well be mirror reflections. Their dishes come on jade trays. Their mats are lined with goose down. Their chopsticks are not wood like yours, but tortoise shell inlaid with tiny pearls. You make it a point not to look directly at them. Across the hall, a minor official, second row, position 7, has accidentally turned slightly too much toward the central dais while adjusting his belt. You watch as one of the eunuch monitors slides over and gently taps his knee with a feathered rod. He bows. He apologizes. The air chills slightly. The feathered rod, a symbol. It means you were seen. Be careful. Every element of this space is designed to communicate status. Your table is modest lacquered wood, no carvings. The gold filigree is only on the rim. You're given one small bonsai tree centerpiece. The Great Eight have mini rock gardens. One has a ceramic crane that moves when incense smoke passes through it. You're given 3 bowls. They're empty for now, but each bowl is a different height. Why? Because the tallest bowl is for the most spiritually potent dish. Not necessarily the most delicious, just the one with the most historical reverence, like phoenix foot stew or celestial melon slices cured in starlight. The middle bowl is for the honor dish. This reflects your rank. Yours will likely be pickled plums or radish and lotus root salad. You're not offended. The lowest bowl, that's the gratitude dish. Something humble, often rice. You're required to bow slightly before and after consuming it. You haven't even touched a grain yet, and already you're exhausted. There's a special dish known as the boundary bowl. It's served only to those seated on the edge of 2 political factions. You're not given one. That's good. People who get boundary bowls often don't get second invitations. Nearby, the servers begin placing symbolic garnishes. Yes, even garnishes reflect hierarchy. You get 1 curl of ginger arranged into a spiral. That spiral indicates neutrality. The person to your right gets 2 leaves of mint laid parallel. They're part of the Ministry of Rights. Elegance is their thing. The man to your left, no garnish at all. You don't ask. Fun fact, during one Qing dynasty banquet, a dish arrived with a single clove of garlic facing upward. That was interpreted as a veiled insult. The guest wept. The chef retired. The air is heavy with expectation, and also sandalwood, and also slight perspiration. The room, though massive, has no fans, only eunuchs with large feather fans standing by the walls, swaying rhythmically. They're not cooling the guests, they're cooling the ambiance. And still, no one has eaten. The emperor hasn't moved. His fingers rest on a carved armrest shaped like a quilin. His chopsticks are untouched, because in this world, nothing happens until the emperor signals it should. You shift your weight barely. Your left foot has gone numb. You wonder how many people have fainted during banquets like this. It must have happened, but the records never mention it. Of course not. You can't record a fall from grace. Instead, you fix your eyes on the small gold-painted character on your table tag. Chang. Sincerity. Everyone's tag is different. Yours is a polite reminder. Be humble, be proper, eat quietly. A few others nearby bear more passive-aggressive slogans like Jing stillness and Jin caution. The woman directly across from you. Hers reads Jing, respect. She sees you looking and nods. You nod back. Alley spy. Hard to say. Either way, it's nice to be acknowledged. Suddenly the music shifts. A single drum beat, followed by a low flute trill. Then, silence. The first tray arrives. Not yours, not yet. The emperor's. Of course, he's served by 4 officials simultaneously. One presents the tray, one opens the lid, one bows. The 4th just stares into the middle distance like he's counting the lifetimes he's spent in this room. The emperor picks up his spoon. Not a word is said. He tastes. One bite. He nods. Only now may the rest of the banquet truly begin. And just like that, the silence fractures, gently, gracefully, like porcelain under warm water. Because now, and only now, after an hour of quiet rituals and quiet terror and quieter digestion, sounds the first real dish is presented before you. But don't get excited. You're not eating yet. You're observing, that's right. The first course at a court banquet isn't for sustenance, it's for reflection, for aesthetic calibration, for symbolic resonance. It's an appetizer, yes, but it's more like a conversation between your soul and your stomach. And your stomach has to wait its turn. Before you lies a pale ceramic bowl. Inside it, a single dumpling floating delicately in a broth, the color of pearls. The dumpling is sealed into the shape of a lotus bud, its folds pinched with such precision you suspect a team of philosophers made it. Steam curls up fragrant and whispery. It smells like ginger chrysanthemum and something else you can't place. Memory, sorrow, imperial funding. Across the hall, servers flow like water, each bearing different trays. Because every dish, every course, is tailored to each guest's station. There is no menu. There are only assignments, and you are expected to receive yours with reverence and absolute stillness. The man, 2 places down, nods slightly at his dish too soon. A servant steps forward and realigns the tray. No one says a word. You wait the required 10 count. Then slowly lift your chopsticks, except you don't lift them off the table. Not yet. First, you acknowledge them. This involves placing your fingertips gently atop the tapered ends and offering a slow, nearly invisible bow, not to the food, but to the moment of transition from observation to action. You do so. Only then are you allowed to raise your chopsticks and touch the dumpling. Not pierce it, not break it, just touch. And then you're required to place your chopsticks back down again. This is the gesture of restraint, a quiet performance of inner discipline. You're not supposed to want the food. You're supposed to honor it. Historians still argue whether this rule was ever broken in secret. One Tang official's diary included a line that read, "I ate the lotus early. I am weak." His descendants reportedly donated a pagoda to make up for the shame. Now the real part, the first bite. You lift the dumpling. You do not bite it in half. That would expose the inside prematurely, a metaphor for immodesty, and nobody likes that. You must consume it whole. It barely fits. You angle it gently. It slides past your lips like a secret. You close your eyes, not in ecstasy. No, that would be indecorous, but in soft, meditative gratitude. It tastes like poetry. Hot, fragrant, complicated. something herbal, something marine. There's a slight sweetness, but it disappears too quickly to grasp. The whole thing dissolves before you can memorize it. You've eaten one dumpling, and already you're emotionally full. And then, almost as if the food heard your thoughts, another dish arrives. Course 2, vinegared melon with silver chrysanthemum petals. It's bright. It's cold. It's been carved into the shape of a phoenix's wing. You eat this one in exactly 3 bites. You must leave one petal in the bowl. That petal is not for you. It's for the kitchen gods. If you eat it, you risk offending both the deity and the chef. They are not the same, but they're equally dangerous. This continues, course after course. Every dish has rules. Course 6. A trio of quail eggs, each dyed a different color, using natural pigments. The green one must be eaten first. The yellow one is peeled and admired, but not consumed. The red one. That one must be handed untouched to the official to your left. You do this. He nods in thanks. He forgets to pass you his red egg. You say nothing. You simply pretend you weren't supposed to receive one. Course 10. Boiled deer tendon. Yes, that's real. It arrives in a broth so thick, it jiggles even when no one breathes. The tendon itself is translucent, the texture somewhere between jelly and regret. This dish is considered a test, not of taste, but of composure. You must eat it with no reaction, no shiver, no flinch, no muttered prayers. You pick it up, you take a bite. It's challenging. It tastes like a ghost's ankle. But you smile, you nod, you chew exactly 5 times and swallow with grace. Across the room, a younger official turns pale and sips tea too quickly. He coughs once. That's all it takes. A eunuch glides over and replaces his dish with a bowl of congee. That's code for, you've failed this course. Try again in 5 years. By the time you reach course 17, pickled apricot, with lotus root lattice, you're deep into a rhythmic trance. The food arrives. You greet it. You consider it. You lift it. You bow. You eat. You smile. You place your chopsticks down again. This dance is delicate, sacred, endless, and you're not even halfway through. Because this banquet, it includes 128 courses. 128. You begin to understand that eating is not the point. Not really. This is ritual consumption. This is a philosophical exercise disguised as dinner. And strangely, you're beginning to enjoy it. By now, you've begun to drift. Not from boredom, though. Let's be honest. Some of these textures defy joy, but from the sheer rhythm of it all. Food arrives. You greet it. You observe. You lift. You bow. You eat. You replace. You wait. It's like breathing. If breathing required ceremonial approval and the judgment of 70 minor nobles, you're on course 23 now. A delicate tofu square no larger than your thumb, cradling a single goji berry and floating in a broth made from spring rainwater, and according to rumor, the tears of monks who failed their exams. You consume it with practiced serenity. But this particular tofu, has a trap. Because this is the facial discipline course, this dish is purposefully bland, deeply bland, like the memory of taste, like biting into polite air, and the goal is to keep your face absolutely neutral, not disappointed, not amused, just appreciative. Why? Because the dish is a test, a silent cue. The kitchen is watching, the emperor is watching, and most importantly, everyone is watching, because each guest at one point will have their reaction reflected and interpreted. Too enthusiastic, you're labeled a glutton. Too distant, you're disrespectful. Blink at the wrong time. You might as well have insulted Confucius's beard. A fun tidbit from the archives. During the Song dynasty, a diplomat was said to have raised one eyebrow while tasting sage-cooked bean paste. That gesture was later painted into a scroll as a warning against pride. His descendants reportedly became tofu vendors. Coincidence? Historians still argue. You pass the tofu test, or so you hope. But now it's time for the chopstick placement protocol, a ritual so delicate that it has spawned not one, but 3 manuals and a tragic play. Your chopsticks must never point directly at another guest. That's tantamount to challenging them to a duel of what likely calligraphy or tax reform. Either way, avoid it. They also may not cross one another. That's a sign of spiritual discord. Nor may they rest in your bowl unless you're signaling you are finished with all courses, including ones not yet served. You do not want that. Instead, you place them parallel tips aligned with the engraved side facing up, resting on the provided chopstick pillow. Yes, there's a chopstick pillow. It's a tiny carved piece of jade, sometimes porcelain, and it exists solely to cradle your eating utensils while your hands reflect on their purpose. You line them up, you double-check, you exhale, you resist the urge to scratch your nose. Nearby, a courtier drops a chopstick. The room doesn't gasp, but the silence tightens. He bows low, mutters an apology in poetic verse, and receives a replacement set from a servant who appears so fast he might have been hiding under the table. Your own hands, shaky, but steady enough, until now. Because course 30 is arriving, and it is a nightmare. The dish, preserved duck egg, encased in jellyfish crown. It looks like something from the dreams of a coral reef, wobbly, mottled, grayish-green with the faint shimmer of iridescence like oil on a puddle. You're expected to pick it up in one motion, rotate it clockwise, once, no more, no less, and then bite diagonally to respect the celestial tilt of the heavens. You do your best. You manage it. But the flavor, oh dear, it tastes like history, like something unearthed from a Ming Dynasty cellar. It's salty, fermented, a little sweet, and alarmingly crunchy in places that should never crunch. You hold the face. You breathe the breath. You swallow the shame. And you bow again. The dish is removed, and you're rewarded. Course 31, lotus seed custard with honey pearls. Warm, soft, delicate, like forgiveness in a bowl. You almost cry, but you don't, because tears must only be shed during designated poetry readings or the emperor's birthday. Next comes the wine interlude. Oh yes, it's time for the cup. A eunuch places before you a small moon-shaped porcelain cup filled with a clear liquid. This is not your average rice wine. This is imperial chrysanthemum dew, fermented, filtered through bamboo charcoal, and aged in a cave that allegedly sings during thunderstorms. You're expected to sip, not gulp. You raise the cup with both hands. Tilt your head slightly and say softly, reverently, harmony within harmony without. Only then do you sip. The wine is cool, floral, with a faint bitterness that settles somewhere behind your teeth, like an ancient proverb. You place the cup down. No clinking, no sloshing, definitely no sighing. It is here, midway through the courses, that you notice the true rhythm of the room. Some guests are slowing down. Others are just now warming up. A few look deeply asleep, but with their eyes open, a skill learned over years. There are patterns to who gets served what when. The minister of rites receives every third course before you. The governor of the western provinces skips every seventh dish entirely. The empress's cousin receives 2 desserts for every 1 main. Nobody speaks of these things, but everyone sees, because this banquet is not just a meal. It is a performance, a map, a floating constellation of favor, intrigue, flavor, and silence. And here you are, still upright, still composed, 31 courses in, 97 to go. But who's counting? Course 32 arrives in a puff of steam and a rustle of silk. You don't see it. At first you smell it, a deep, earthy aroma, like mushrooms and soil after rain. Then the servant kneels before you, revealing a shallow stone bowl lined with lotus leaves. Inside, stone-boiled bamboo hearts with dusted truffle root. It's beautiful, quietly elegant. The colors are muted ivory moss green and a sprinkle of something gray that glimmers like powdered pearl. You lean slightly forward as custom demands and whisper the prescribed line, "I welcome the depth of the earth within." Yes, every third dish must be greeted aloud. Not too loud, not a whisper, just the right pitch to signal humility and fluency in banquet etiquette. You pick up a slice of bamboo heart. It bends but doesn't break soft, on the outside firm, in the center, like the best civil servants. You chew slowly, letting the flavor bloom. It's unexpectedly smoky. And now you remember, this is one of the regional honor dishes, prepared in the style of a remote southern province known for its volcanic soil and revolutionary poems. It's political. You're not sure what it means, but it definitely means something. Across the room, a senior official lifts his bowl to eye level, a gesture of approval, or possibly mild defiance. You take note. You don't copy him. You just note. The thing is, by now you've realized something truly chilling. This entire banquet is a conversation, not with words, but with glances, gestures, chews. Who eats what, when, and how? Who leaves a garnish untouched? Who finishes their bowl too fast or too slow? It's a dance of diplomacy played out in broth and condiments. There's a story from the Han Dynasty about a minister who was exiled for using his left hand to reach for the pickled radish. Left hand, pickled radish, exile. Just imagine the footnotes. And now course 33 arrives, and it's fish. That means you must smile. Yes, the official facial response to any fish course is a serene smile of gratitude. No exceptions. The fish is small, silver-scaled, steamed with goji berries and chrysanthemum threads. It's not smiling at you, but you're required to smile at it. You comply. Not too wide, not too toothy. Just a soft, yes, we are grateful to this fish for dying tastefully expression. You notice your neighbor does not smile. Instead, he frowns ever so slightly. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe he hates fish. Maybe he's allergic to symbolism. Whatever the reason, a eunuch appears at his side and quietly offers him tea. That's the code. The tea offering isn't kindness. It's a warning, a chance to recenter, to return to the expected behavior. He accepts the tea. He sips. You do not make eye contact with him for the rest of the evening. And that's not even the weird part. The weird part is this. You're about to frown at tofu because course 34 is steamed tofu with plum vinegar reduction. And court custom dictates that tofu symbolizes mourning. It is the food of solemnity. So, by rule, your expression must match. Yes, that's right. You smiled at fish. You frown at tofu. That's the law. No one knows exactly why. Historians still debate whether tofu was associated with ancestral rites or simply seen as emotionally neutral in taste. One theory suggests it was Emperor Gaozu's favorite thinking food and therefore required the eater to look appropriately troubled. You spoon the tofu gently. It jiggles. You frown. A soft, contemplative frown, like someone pondering the fall of dynasties or wondering if they left the brazier on at home. The vinegar hits your tongue like a sigh. It's sharper than expected, clears your sinuses, reminds you that you're very much alive even if your knees disagree. The servant removes the bowl. You maintain the frown for 3 extra seconds, just to be safe. And now comes a tricky transition. The dumpling nods. Yes, plural, because course 35 brings not 1 but 3 dumplings, each one a different color, white, green, and pink. Each one requires a different response. The white dumpling filled with sesame and yam gets a soft nod of respect. The green dumpling stuffed with bok choy and mushroom earns a nod of acknowledgement slightly faster. The pink dumpling with sweet lotus paste is the joy dumpling and must be greeted with a nod of gentle delight, paired with a brief, approving breath through the nose. That's right. You're breathing at dumplings now. This is your life. You perform the dumpling nods flawlessly, or close enough. The servant bows slightly. Success. You begin to notice small changes. The incense has shifted scent, less floral, more woody. The breeze through the palace windows carries a note of cinnamon, and the music, it's moved from stringed instruments to soft drums. This signals the transition into banquet phase 2, a part of the evening defined by denser dishes, deeper silences, and more symbolic pressure. Course 36 is duck tongue in osmanthus jelly. No commentary, just pain. You chew, you pray, you survive. And then a soft chime, a very soft chime. You recognize it, the chopstick realignment bell. Yes, there is a specific moment in the banquet when every guest must pause and realign their chopsticks to prepare for heavier meat-based dishes. You stop mid-bite. You set down your utensils. You adjust them to the harvest position, slightly angled, pointing toward the center of your plate tips, resting on a slice of ginger. Not your choice. That's the rule. You glance across the table. The noblewoman, 2 seats over, has placed hers too straight. The fan behind her tilts. A warning. She corrects herself with the elegance of someone who's been warned before. And so the meal continues. Slow, endless, beautiful, terrifying. And you're still here, still chewing, still smiling at fish and frowning at tofu, still surviving. Course 37 arrives in utter silence. You don't hear footsteps. You don't hear breathing. What you hear is presence, the kind of hush that makes the hairs on your arms stand up as if the air itself knows something important is about to happen. Before you is a golden dish, thin as parchment, shaped like a crane in flight. Inside, dumplings filled with mist, poached radish, and saffron, arranged in the form of a blossoming peony. It's stunning. You want to applaud. You do not. Because this is a silent dish. No clinks, no chewing sounds, no expressions. You must consume it as if you were meditating underwater in the presence of the emperor, the ancestors, and your inner sense of propriety. So you inhale deeply, silently. You pick up your chopsticks gently, and you lift the dumpling carefully. No sauce, no dip, just direct communion. You place it in your mouth. Chew, slowly, softly. It's perfect, earthy, and floral. You experience the faintest crunch, then a velvet softness, then warmth, like biting into the season of spring, but of course you cannot react, not even with your eyes, because this is part of the non-expression mandate. a period of the banquet during which all guests must eat without any outward display. It typically lasts for 5 to 7 dishes and was reportedly invented by an emperor who once said, "Only silence tastes true." Historians still argue whether this was philosophical genius or indigestion-induced poetry. Regardless, you're in it now, and it's not easy. Because course 38 is glazed taro in fermented garlic paste. And you have to act like that's completely normal. You taste it. It's unique. You think it might be good. You're not sure. You want to frown. You want to tilt your head. You want to ask the nearest scholar if this flavor is correct. But you remain blank. You sip tea. You survive. And then, just when you're adjusting to this mute elegance, your neighbor breaks the rule. He snorts, quietly, barely audible, probably at the taro, but audible enough. The fan behind him stops moving, then starts again, slightly faster. That's not for him, that's for you. A message you saw nothing. So you sip your tea again and pretend you're deaf. Course 39 is served in a bowl shaped like a chrysanthemum. Inside egg custard with crab roe and ginkgo seeds. A dish reserved for the midpoint of the banquet, a palate reset. It's light comforting, oddly sweet. You're allowed to show pleasure for this one, but only through the eyes. Yes, a sparkle, a flicker, a soft blink. That's the custard delight signal. Too sparkly, and you seem shallow. Too dull, and you insult the chef. It's a delicate equation. You aim for medium sparkle and move on. Course 40, fermented tofu skins wrapped around black mushrooms and pine nuts. No rules here. Just chew and breathe. A brief pause, a blessing. But then, course 41, the dumpling of sorrow. That's not a joke. It's an actual title. The dumpling of sorrow appears at every banquet to honor the ancestors and recognize the tragedies of the empire's past. It's not meant to be delicious. It's meant to be reflective. It's filled with pickled mustard, root bitter melon, and a sliver of dried orange peel. The bitterness is intentional. The sourness is meant to stir memory. The orange, a nod to cycle's loss, healing loss. Again, you eat it in 3 bites, and after the final one, you bow your head for 5 full seconds. This is not optional. Even the emperor participates in this dish. It is the one moment where all guests are unified in humility, in remembrance, in shared discomfort. You hear a soft sniffle across the hall. Not ridicule, just release. The music has shifted again. A solo zither now, minor key. The notes fall like teardrops on a lacquered floor. And then, course 42, the surprise plate. No one knows what it will be. It changes with each banquet. It is chosen by the emperor or his food minister, designed to test spontaneity. Tonight it's jellied pigeon tongue atop a square of chilled egg yolk, custard with a single mint leaf pressed like a seal on top. You blink, you breathe, you don't hesitate, because hesitation is noted. You lift your chopsticks. The texture is strange, gelatinous, rich. Then suddenly, floral from the mint. Your face blank, your heart racing. You've passed. Maybe. The surprise plate is known to have ended careers, or launched them. There's a famous tale of a scholar who complimented the emperor's surprise dish using a verse about clouds and regret. He became governor of 2 provinces, or depending on the scroll, was poisoned by mistake. Either way, you offer no verse. Just a respectful nod. You notice your neighbor offering his surprise plate to the eunuch behind him. He's finished, quietly, excused. Not in disgrace, just done, that's allowed after course 42. But you remain. Because you are not here just to eat. You are here to endure. And enduring means moving on to course 43. Course 43 comes in quiet procession, as if it knows it's being delivered into a room full of people, dangerously full, emotionally drained and spiritually restructured by dumplings. The servant kneels. You do not look at them. Your gaze stays fixed on the bowl, square, celadon green, its glaze crackled like frozen rain. Inside silken noodles, in pine resin broth, garnished with 7 slivers of yellow yam and 1 golden goji berry. This is the unification dish, a symbolic course placed almost exactly 1/3 into the banquet, always featuring 7 of one thing and 1 of another. Scholars suggest it reflects the ancient celestial pattern of 7 visible stars and 1 hidden sun. Others think the chef just liked yams. Regardless, you must consume this dish in 8 precise movements. Lift noodles. Stir once clockwise. Lower. Pause. Lift again. Separate 1 yam sliver. Eat the noodle. Finish with the goji berry, no chewing. You execute the movements like a nervous dancer at a royal recital. The broth tastes faintly sweet resinous and strangely metallic, like eating something ancient, sacred, and possibly sentient. Across the room, someone sneezes. Immediately, a handbell rings softly near the western column. That's not for the sneezer. That's for everyone else. A reminder to stay focused, because it's time for topic control. Yes, conversation, if it happens at all, must now adhere to strict boundaries. A scroll is passed silently among the higher tables, listing the permitted topics of discourse. You don't receive it. You're too low ranked. But you've heard of this list. You know the rules. There are only 3 approved topics during this course window: reflections on nature's balance, praise of historical reforms that are no longer in effect, commentary on the texture of root vegetables without metaphor, off-limit topics. Everything else, especially ghosts, especially tax policy, especially the emperor's eyebrows. Historians still argue about this 3rd one. Did someone once compare them to storm clouds over a perfect pond? And was that person ever seen again? You don't ask, because a woman across the hall just tried to talk about irrigation practices, and a eunuch is already beside her with a small tray. The tray contains nothing, just space. But the message is clear. No. Back to your bowl. You sip, you chew, you nod, just once to a yam slice. Course 44 arrives. This one is a small, almost hidden dish, sweet radish, rolled in sesame paste and gold leaf. It sparkles like a bribe, and you know better than to enjoy it too much, because this is the flattery trap. It tastes incredible, crunchy, nutty, slightly spicy. But the rule here is underreact. Too much delight, and you risk implying that earlier dishes were inferior. Too little delight, and you offend the chef, who, by the way, ranks higher than you in the current court. So, you go neutral. A small nod, a quiet breath, a smile so soft it might be mistaken for a cough. You pass. Course 45, thinly sliced venison dried over plum wood. You chew. It tastes like quiet ambition. Course 46, crispy lotus stems with vinegar glaze. You crunch gently because crunching must not exceed 1.5 audible clicks. There's a eunuch near the emperor with the crunch record scroll. He writes nothing as you finish. Safe. And now, Course 47, the mandatory complement dish. You are required, yes, required, to say something kind about this dish. Allowed phrases include, the balance of textures is most harmonious. The scent recalls the wisdom of late spring. This reflects the clarity of the palace mind. You're eating a duck egg custard drizzled with plum syrup and shredded pear. It's fine. But you say the softness here walks between two worlds. You are proud of that one. The servant bows slightly. You are very proud of that one. But before you can enjoy your poetic success, Course 48 is placed in front of you, and it's tofu again. Only this time, it's dyed purple with beetroot and topped with a single preserved olive. This is symbolic tofu, which means you must again frown, but this time with elevated gravity. Why? Because this tofu represents the burden of governance. You do not know what that means, but you frown accordingly. A slow, sorrowful knit of the brow, a downward glance at the olive, a pause before consumption. Across the room, someone closes their eyes while chewing. That's the advanced tofu maneuver. Bold, risky, admirable. Now the light begins to shift. The sun, filtered through red lattice windows, casts dragon-shaped shadows across the jade floor. The music slows. You know what this means. We are entering the gesture course window. Yes, each guest must now, for the next 5 dishes, respond to each course with a specific gesture. Not a word, not a sound, just motion. The gestures are open palms raised once, gratitude, 2 fingers tapped twice on the mat, agreement, chopsticks held upright for a heartbeat, respect, a single blink held 3 seconds, reflection, a gentle tilt of the head to the right, internal sorrow. Course 49. Arrives river moss, soup with rice pearls. You tilt your head to the right. Moss always brings sorrow. Course 50. Sesame balls with sweet mung bean. You tap twice. Mung bean is agreeable. Course 51. Beef marrow jelly with garlic oil. You raise your palms. You need support. Chorus 52. Salted duck breast with tea smoke. You blink. 3 seconds. You reflect. Course 53. Pickled bamboo shoot with chili glaze. You raise your chopsticks. Respect. Not for the dish. For surviving this far. You are halfway through. You've smiled at fish. You've frowned at tofu. You've blinked at bamboo. And now you rest. Briefly. Because course 54 is already on its way, and the chili is visible from here. Course 54 lands like a firecracker dressed in porcelain. It's a small dish, but not a quiet one, shredded red chili with fermented plum and candied citrus peel, served on a leaf of raw ginger. It glistens, ominously glowing, like lacquered danger. And you have to eat it in one bite. Yes, one single bite, no matter how spicy, how mouth-burning, how memory-erasing it may be. Because this is the resilience course, a dish served to test your poise under duress. You're expected to consume it, maintain a neutral expression, and continue as if your mouth is not currently trying to evacuate your dignity. You steel yourself. You lift it. You eat. At first it's citrus, sweet, even comforting. Then comes the chili. Oh no, not a gradual heat, not a polite warmth, but a detonation. Your tongue bursts into alarm. Your lips feel like they've been cursed by a vengeful pepper god. Your eyes threaten betrayal. You swallow. You breathe. You blink. Twice. But you do not reach for your water. Because reaching for the tea too quickly is a sign of weakness. So you let the pain sit there. Simmer. Your inner self screams. Your outer self nods politely at the bowl. Across the room, someone exhales audibly. A eunuch appears behind them almost instantly, handing them a chilled handkerchief. They are now marked as moderately faltered. You remain unmarked because you've prepared for this, mentally, spiritually. Also, because you read the trick in a dusty scroll, pinch your left thumb discreetly beneath your robe, and focus on the pain. It works. Somehow, you survive. And then the fire fades. Just in time for course 55, snow gourd in almond milk, with 3 drops of osmanthus honey. Ah yes, the soothing course. This one is mercy in a bowl, served cold, silky, mild, a reward, and also a trap. Because if you sigh in relief, it means you were struggling, and that's unbecoming. You take a spoonful. It's bliss. You say nothing, you show nothing, but your soul bows. Now begins a unique tradition, the compliment exchange. For the next few courses, mid-level guests like you are permitted to pass compliment tokens, tiny slips of silk embroidered with praise phrases to other guests at your rank or lower. It's a networking tool, a political gesture, and a dangerous game. You receive your first token with course 56, honeyed dates wrapped in tea-smoked pork skin. The token is tucked beneath the dish. It reads, "Your elegance humbles the rice. You turn to your left. The older woman there gives the tiniest of nods. You respond by sliding one of your own tokens discreetly beneath your next dish. Course 57, river snail dumplings in mint broth. You write, your composure outshines the bamboo. A little poetic, a little daring. You hope it lands well. The servant collecting the dish tilts his head approval. You're learning the game. But now comes a dish that requires no compliments, only reverence. Course 58, phoenix egg, custard. There are no phoenixes involved. It's just a name. It's a sacred dish, served only during full banquets made from duck eggs, star anise, and something the kitchen only describes as spirit jelly. It is presented on a lacquered pedestal. You're required to bow once before eating. Then you must consume it in perfect silence, eyes closed, imagining the rebirth of order and harmony in the empire. You obey. And as the custard melts on your tongue, rich and strangely floral, you feel calm. The fire of the chili is gone. Your hands stop trembling. You even forget your knees. This is perhaps the first truly comforting dish so far. And just as it ends, course 59 arrives, tea leaf salad with crushed lotus seeds and pickled ginger root. This is the reflection dish, meant to remind you of the land, the farmers, the quiet pulse of the empire beneath all this silk and ceremony. Each bite must be chewed 16 times minimum. You count, you chew, you reflect. You remember your mother telling you that tea leaves were bitter for a reason. You remember your father saying, politics is like salad dressed, tangled, and full of hidden roots. You remember your first robe that didn't fit. You remember your first invitation to court. And you remember that this too shall pass. Eventually. Course 60 is a palate cleanser, cucumber chrysanthemum, and seaweed slivers arranged in the shape of a fan. You must fan yourself once before eating. Yes, with your hand. One swift, graceful motion, the cooling gesture. You do it. It works. Briefly. Because course 61 is here and it's time for your second wine. This is the transparent wine, also known as water that feels too honest. It's poured from a bottle carved from ice into a square-cut glass cup. No toasts, no words. You simply drink. And it hits you, not the alcohol, the memory. It tastes like the last time you were here, the last banquet, the last dumpling, the last mistake. You sip slowly. You clear your mind, and you prepare. Because the next phase, forbidden conversation. Course 62 is silken fish thread soup with floating lily petals. It means don't talk, think, choose. Because after this dish, the court permits you to speak, but only once. One sentence, one opinion, one well-timed, beautifully worded observation. You begin drafting it in your head. You glance across the room. You wonder who's watching. The answer, everyone. Course 63 arrives, and the room holds its collective breath, not because of the food, but because of what comes after. This is the transition dish, also known as the one-sentence window. It's small, simple, deceptively humble. A single bite of steamed chestnut rice, topped with candied lotus root, shaped like a coin. You are expected to chew it exactly 8 times, then offer a single measured statement. One sentence, no more, no less. This is your social currency, and like all currency, it can appreciate or destroy you. You've been rehearsing your line in your head since the fish thread soup. You thought about quoting a philosopher. You considered something seasonal. You briefly flirted with a pun. You settle on this. The balance of heat and memory reminds me of an early frost on plum blossoms. You speak softly, clearly, at exactly the right pause between courses. The words float, not loud, not boastful, just intentional. And then silence. You've offered your sentence. Across the room, another guest says, "One can taste the shape of patience in the lotus." Murmurs of approval rise, controlled, contained. A eunuch bows. That guest has been heard. Elsewhere, someone tries. These textures are very interesting. Oh no, too vague, too modern. The fan behind them flicks once. They've been noted. You relax just a little. You passed. Course 64 is placed in front of you, jujube stuffed eggplant fritter, glazed with rice syrup and arranged into the shape of a peacock feather. This one has no rules. Just eat. Just enjoy. It's the court's version of a reward dish given after the one-sentence window, so everyone can reset. The fritter is warm, crispy on the outside, almost syrupy inside. It tastes like generosity. But now, with the sentence phase concluded, you must prepare for the recitation ritual. Yes, there will be poetry, not yours, unless you're very, very unlucky, because Course 65, 5-spice millet with curled fig leaves and vinegar foam, is traditionally paired with a performance from the Ministry of Ritual Verse. A singer appears. She walks slowly down the center aisle, robes flowing like calligraphy strokes. Her voice begins low and smooth, reciting a Tang-era poem about longing and river fog. You are expected to pause eating. Rest your chopsticks on your jade pillow. Close your eyes. Tilt your head slightly to the left. You comply. The poem is long, beautiful, haunting. It's about 2 lovers who meet every 12th winter at the banks of the Yellow River, but can only speak in riddles. You think about tofu. You think about your neighbor, who is definitely asleep, with his eyes open. The poem ends. There is no applause, only a soft bell. And then Course 66 appears, as if summoned by verse. Pumpkin blossom fritter, resting on sweet rice pearls, and a dusting of pine pollen. It looks like a comet, frozen mid-flight. You eat it with one bite, a nod, and a thought, how many more? The answer, still many. But Course 67 provides a moment of joy. It's water chestnut cake with osmanthus syrup, served with a tiny matching spoon carved from sandalwood. This dish must be eaten with the left hand, symbolizing the turning of fate. The spoon is fragrant, the syrup is light floral and syrupy with restrained elegance. It tastes like the color amber feels gentle, slow, honeyed. You want another. You will not get one. Now a shift, a silence. Again. Not ceremonial this time, but anticipatory. Because course 68 is served in pairs. Yes, the first and only shared course of the banquet. This is the mutual bowl. In your case, steamed yam and lotus broth served in a large double-handled bowl placed between you and your direct neighbor. You must both bow to the bowl. Then, one at a time, serve a ladleful into each other's cup. Not your own. That would be unforgivably selfish. So you reach, you ladle, you serve them. They nod. They serve you. You both sip. The gesture matters more than the broth, which is slightly salty, slightly earthy, and forgettable in the best way. This dish tests cooperation. Past banquets have ended in passive-aggressive disasters during this course. Once a governor reportedly spilled the ladle on purpose. His counterpart declined the next invitation. 10 years passed before reconciliation. You and your neighbor smooth. You are now officially acquaintances by yam. There's even a term for it in the banquet lexicon. Now, course 69. It comes with music again. This time a solo pipa played by a woman seated behind a silk screen. As she plays, servants bring pearl mushroom and pine oil rice cake shaped like plum blossoms. It is not required to eat during this piece, but if you do, you must chew in rhythm with the music. Yes, there are chewing rhythms, notated even. This song is in 4/4 time slow tempo. You wait for the beat. You bite. You chew 1, 2, 3, 4. You swallow during the rest. You nail it. Somehow. You don't cry, but you might be close. The man across from you. He chews offbeat. The woman next to him flicks her fan in irritation. A eunuch tilts his head in dismay. Off-rhythm chewing is social chaos. But you're holding steady until course 70 is placed before you, and suddenly the air changes, because this is the emperor's reflection dish. Every guest gets the same bowl. White radish, boiled in chrysanthemum broth, etched with golden threads of egg, with exactly one petal from the garden of the palace itself. No one speaks. No one eats. Until the emperor lifts his spoon. You watch. He does. You lift yours. You sip. It's subtle, delicate, solemn. And just before the bowl leaves your lips, you understand. This dish isn't about taste. It's about presence. You have arrived at the center of the storm. And for a single moment you are not worried about tofu. You are simply here. You lower the spoon from your lips, feeling the warmth of the chrysanthemum broth linger on your tongue. A floral hush, a weightless echo. No salt, no sweetness, just presence. The kind that leaves room for thought, not reaction. The bowl is removed with reverence. The servant bows, so low you can see the nape of his neck shimmer with fine sweat. He, too, knows what this course means. Because Course 70, the Emperor's reflection dish, was the emotional and symbolic apex of the banquet. Everything from here on descent, a descent made of velvet ceremony and the long slope of fullness. Now comes Course 71, crimson yam in candied ginger glaze, resting on a dried lotus leaf. It is the first course in what's officially known as the gratitude sequence, a string of dishes meant to express thankfulness to the earth, to the dynasty, to ancestors, and to the emperor's digestive fortitude. You're required to consume this dish using a special gratitude spoon, a long, narrow silver utensil with a slight twist at the neck, designed to slow your motion and your chewing to encourage mindfulness. You oblige. The yam is warm, slightly spicy, with that oddly numbing sensation ginger sometimes brings. You resist the urge to lick the syrup from your lips, because this is not dessert, not yet. Course 72, fermented tofu and spring onion folded into millet crepes, served on an oval plate resembling a calligraphy stroke. It arrives already folded. You're expected to unfold it. Why? Because this dish is metaphor, a nod to the uncovering of virtue through modesty. You unfold slowly. Steam escapes, soft, herbal, almost grassy. You eat it in 4 bites, alternating sides, left, right, because balance matters more than speed. Across from you, someone eats straight down the middle. You don't look up, but you know the others saw. One woman taps her chopsticks once slowly. That's the nonverbal tisk. Ouch! Course 73 floats in like a gentle cloud. Jasmine-stuffed rice spheres served in a chilled bowl of dew-soaked snow fungus. Delicate, translucent, a dish designed to fade, to dissolve, to help you to soften. You're no longer analyzing flavors. You're simply existing inside them. A fringe rule applies here. Guests who yawn politely may be excused after this course. This is known as the compassion exit. You watch 3 guests across the hall yawn elegantly and bow. Servants surround them like dancers, guiding them out with barely a sound. You are not leaving. You've come this far. You'll see it through. Course 74 is placed before you with a small ceremonial bell rung once at your side. This is the memory dish. What's in it? That depends. It's different for every guest. Yours is sliced sweet potato in 5-spice vinegar layered over taro mash and decorated with a single candied walnut. It looks familiar. You can't place it at first, then it hits you. Your grandmother made something like this when you were a child, back before you had titles, before you knew what silence and robes and chopstick pillows meant. You swallow hard. You eat. You remember. The room around you fades for a breath, then returns, because course 75 is next, and it's loud, not audibly, symbolically. Crisped eel skin wrapped around crushed garlic chive and rice pearls skewered on a jade pin. It's called the resurgence dish. It follows the memory course intentionally to jolt you back into the present. The eel crunches like new resolve. You chew with care. You do not bleed. Yes, it's been known to happen with poorly skewered guests. You place the jade pin back in its case. You move on. Course 76, silken seaweed broth with lotus pollen and 2 floating chrysanthemum seeds. This is the dreaming dish, served specifically to make you sleepy. Yes, the herbs in this broth are mild soporifics, not to knock you unconscious, just to encourage stillness. You sip. Warmth flows from your throat to your shoulders. You feel the pull. You sit straighter, because you must remain awake for course 77, the Emperor's second spoon. Yes, he gets 2, and you share in this one. It's a shared signal of unity across ranks, a quiet message that by reaching this far, you have in some way matched him in endurance. Tonight's spoon, pickled pear slices soaked in mulberry wine and ginger syrup, served on an ice disk, shaped like a plum blossom. You place it on your tongue, whole. You do not chew. You let it melt. You imagine the Emperor doing the same. Somewhere across this sea of mats and robes, he might even be watching. Course 78 follows quickly. Sweet bean jelly, molded into ancient coin shapes. No metaphor here, just wealth, prosperity, good fortune. And you're to eat this dish using your non-dominant hand, a symbolic gesture that says, even that which is unfamiliar brings reward. You fumble slightly, everyone does. The point is humility. Now, course 79, the penultimate. Rice flour dumplings with black sesame core dusted in powdered chrysanthemum and placed in a shallow golden boat. This is the farewell dish. It's the last one to involve your chopsticks. You eat it slowly. 3 chews. 1 bow. Chopsticks down. Permanently. Servants come. They remove your utensils like relics, placing them into velvet-lined cases. You will not touch them again tonight. And now, course 80. A single cherry preserved in honey wine served on a spoon made of pressed flower petals. The final taste. This one you eat with your eyes closed. There is no sound, no movement, just sweetness and silence. And then, nothing. You are full, but more than that, you are finished. You do not open your eyes right away. You let the aftertaste of that final cherry linger, a slow unfurling sweetness, faintly floral, warm at the edges, like the sun setting behind a silk screen. The servers know not to disturb you yet. That's part of the ritual. Because course 80 doesn't end when the cherry disappears. It ends when you return from it. And when you do open your eyes, it's not to more food, but to water. The cleansing cup, a jade-colored ceramic vessel, is placed before you, filled with infused snow melt water, chilled and barely aromatic with winter herbs, mint leaf, wild chrysanthemum, and just a whisper of orange peel. This is not for thirst. This is for completion. You do not gulp. You sip 3 sips, only one for the body, one for the spirit, and one for the dynasty. This part is old, very old. Some claim it predates recorded banquet law, that early emperors drank the same cup after ceremonial hunts and offerings, that it signifies release. You sip, first, second, third, and you bow slightly toward the cup. It is taken from you with a reverent nod from the server, who doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You've entered the final chapter now, the toasting circle. You hear the faint jingle of jade tassels and the rustle of rising robes as a series of small gold cups are passed from one side of the hall to the other. These are the imperial toast cups, lightweight, thin-lipped, and smaller than your palm. No one fills their own. You do not touch the cup until it is placed directly in front of you. A eunuch brings yours with both hands, his palms covered in silk cloth. He bows. You bow back. The exchange is seamless. The cup contains plum wine, a darker blend than before, aged in wood, and known to warm the chest as it moves downward. There's a faint smell of cinnamon. You lift it, slowly, not above shoulder level. That would imply arrogance. Not too low, that implies detachment. Just beneath your chin, perfectly level. And you wait. Because the toast is not yours to start. It belongs first and always to the emperor. Somewhere in the distance, his figure moves. He lifts his cup. The hall holds its breath. He tilts, drinks. Only then do you tilt yours and sip. It is sharp, sweet, a little sad, because with this, you are no longer guests. You are witnesses. You have survived the banquet, the silence, the tofu, the speeches in bites. You are now permitted to turn slightly to your neighbor and clink cups, but only if you've received eye contact first. You wait. Your neighbor looks up. You nod. She nods back. Your cups meet with the softest sound, a sound designed not to interrupt anything at all. You sip again. Only now is light conversation allowed, but still only in quiet tones, and only on the following topics: gratitude for the meal, praise for the emperor's leadership, reflections on a specific dish that moved you. You choose the safe route. You lean toward your neighbor and whisper, "The rice sphere in snow fungus was gentle." She replies, "The eel had structure." High praise in court terms. You both smile. Then return to posture, because next is the petal ceremony. Servants enter carrying lacquered trays filled with flower petals, magnolia, plum blossom, lotus. Each guest is offered one. You receive a pale pink petal folded like an envelope. Inside, a line of verse. You unfold it. It reads, "Even full, the heart remains hungry for beauty. You bow your head slightly, then place the petal into the shallow porcelain tray now placed beside you. This tray, you remember, is the reflection basin. Once filled with petals, these basins will be carried into the inner garden and floated down the imperial stream. Symbolic, of course, but also oddly calming. You look up, and now you see it. The emperor has risen. He is walking, not alone, but flanked by silence. He does not wave. He does not smile. He simply departs. This is your signal. The banquet is over. But you are not dismissed. Not yet. Because before anyone can leave, you must complete the gesture of closure. It's simple. You raise your right hand to your chest palm. Open. You tilt your head to the left and you close your eyes for 3 heartbeats. This gesture says, I have received. I will carry it. I will not disturb what was given. You do it, and you feel something settle in your chest. Then comes the final song. A pair of singers emerge, dressed in robes embroidered with cranes and rivers. Their voices are soft and high, weaving together like incense smoke. They sing of endings, of gratitude, of the passage of seasons and the necessity of good digestion. You smile. The song lasts exactly 2 minutes and 16 seconds. It always does. No one knows why. And then silence again. A gong rings 3 times. The same bell you heard at the very beginning. We've come full circle. It is now time for the exit protocol, and you better believe that has its own rules. The gong's final chime fades into the beams above, and immediately the atmosphere shifts, not louder, not faster, but more fragile, like a silk thread stretched between 2 poles, one breath away from trembling. Because this part, the exit protocol, is a final test of composure. And if you're being honest, knees. They're screaming. Every part of you aches. Your stomach is full. Your back stiff, your brain wrapped in etiquette like a dumpling in lotus leaf. But none of that matters, because leaving a banquet improperly is worse than sneezing during the emperor's spoon, worse than biting tofu with enthusiasm, worse than stepping on a dragon tile at sunrise. This is the end, and you must leave with grace. First, the floor. It's important you do not rise directly from your cushion like some uncultured merchant. You perform the 3-stage ascent shift, your left foot back beneath your robe. Lean forward, hands on your knees, not the floor. Rise halfway, pause, then lift fully in one fluid motion. You do this. Barely. You hear a joint pop. That's a loud audible creaking, is noted but not punished. After course 80. You're upright. Now comes the angle of departure. You must not walk directly toward the door. That would imply haste, or rudeness, or worst of all, relief. Instead, you exit in a diagonal path, stepping first backward, then curving slightly left, then forward, in a soft arc like the petal of a falling flower. Yes, you are expected to walk like metaphor, and you do. Slowly, quietly, your sleeves gathered at the wrist, your gaze forward but slightly lowered, never making eye contact with any statues, eunuchs, or portraits. There's a painting of a tiger on the south wall. You absolutely must not look it in the eye. You pass it. You are safe. Ahead at the gate of returning harmony, the final fan holders await. They wave long red feathered fans not to cool you, but to bless your departure. Each guest walks between the fans. You hear one swoosh behind you. That means approved departure. You exhale softly. And then you arrive at the decompression courtyard. This space exists purely for guests to adjust to the shock of being outside the banquet room. The light is gentler here, the air cooler. The sound of a bamboo water fountain trickles nearby. You pause. This pause is required, at least 30 seconds. A servant offers you a warm towel soaked in sweet osmanthus water. You wipe your face. The scent is faint but grounding. The towel is folded into the shape of a cloud. You're not sure how. Once refreshed, you approach the reflection gate. This gate only opens once every 3 minutes. Why? To stagger exits and avoid social collisions. A scholar once exited at the same moment as a rival poet, and their silent bow-off lasted 6 minutes. The court changed policy the following month. Your gate opens. You pass through. Beyond it is the scroll keeper's station. Here you are offered a scroll, blank parchment, ink, and brush. Yes. Before you leave the palace grounds entirely, you must compose your banquet reflection statement. Minimum 3 lines, maximum 12. You kneel yes again and take the brush. Your joints creak like floorboards. The attendant politely pretends not to notice. You write beneath jasmine steam and dumpling breath. The empire's stillness fed us well. Silence tastes different when shared. You stop there. 3 lines. Elegant. Balanced. The scroll is rolled, stamped with your name, and filed into the archives. It will be kept for 70 years, minimum, because every guest's words become part of banquet history. Some guests use this moment to settle political tensions, signal loyalty, or praise obscure dishes with subtextual meanings. You just want a nap. But before you go, there's one final moment. A eunuch steps forward and places a jade token in your hand. No words, just the token. It's small, cool to the touch, carved with the character de received. It means you have been acknowledged. You may return. Maybe not soon. Maybe not for a decade. But you were here, and you passed. You bow one final time to the garden, the air, the sky. Then you step onto the outer path. You are outside the court now, still in your robe, still walking carefully, still digesting spiritually and physically. Behind you, the palace hums with lingering warmth. Ahead of you, the long walk home. You are no longer a guest. You are a vessel, and the banquet lives inside you. The cool air wraps around you as you step farther from the palace like the hush after an opera's final note. The path ahead is lit with small lanterns, swaying from bamboo poles, casting gentle glows across the stone. It's silent, almost sacred. Your body wants to collapse. Your spirit surprisingly awake. That's by design, because after every full imperial banquet, guests enter a phase known simply as posture hour, an unwritten rule wherein your posture must remain upright and elegant for at least 60 more minutes. Why? Because if someone sees you slouch or stretch immediately after leaving, it implies weakness, or worse, disinterest. So you walk slowly, back straight, robe gathered, expression still fixed in the neutral softness of digestion and deference. You pass through the courtyard of tempered minds, a long stretch between two rows of cypress trees, where guests traditionally stroll in silence. Every 10 meters, a small marker stone bears a quote from the Book of Rites. You read one aloud softly, "He who endures the bitter for the sake of the sweet becomes the vessel of harmony." You're fairly certain they were referring to that pickled goose tendon back in course 29. Another quote, "The banquet is not for the mouth, but for the memory." You remember the dumpling that tasted like rain, the tofu that demanded frowning, the cherry that closed the sky. Ahead, you see a pavilion, the hall of echoing cups. It's optional, but if you enter, it's understood that you're willing to participate in the final gesture. You hesitate, then enter. Inside the hall is cool, round with a single shallow pool at its center. Around it, guests are seated on low cushions. Each one holds a cup, not for drinking, but for releasing. Yes, this is the toast of unsaid things. You're handed a ceramic cup, plain, no markings. You're to hold it in both palms, raise it to your forehead, and imagine the one thing you wanted to say during the banquet, but didn't. It might be a compliment, a thought, a small rebellion. You think, you breathe, and you whisper, "I liked the custard too much." I almost smiled. You tilt the cup over the pool. Nothing pours from it, but symbolically, you've emptied it. The cup is taken away. No one claps. No one nods. That's the point. You rise and leave. You walk alone for a while, through a corridor of wind chimes that tinkle just loud enough to disguise your thoughts. The wind lifts the edges of your robe. You loosen the inner sash slightly, just a little. Freedom, quiet. And now comes the practical part of the exit. The banquet debrief scroll. Yes, there's a scroll, an official document provided by the Office of Post-Dining Records, wherein you are asked to confirm that you arrived on time, that you completed all required gestures, that you consumed all core ceremonial dishes, or provided an acceptable verse of refusal, that you participated or observed appropriately during the recitation phase, that you did not mention ghost taxes or the emperor's eyebrows. You sign it with a brush so fine it's like writing with a spider's leg. A clerk stamps it. Your name is now etched forever into the records of this night, and you're finally allowed to change your shoes. Yes, it's written nowhere, but everyone does it. You stop at a small wooden bench near the edge of the imperial grounds. A servant waits with your walking shoes, plain soft, slightly worn. You slip them on. Your feet exhale. And for the first time in 8 hours, you are truly grounded. Now the journey home. No horses, still not allowed within the inner city's sacred zones this late. But there are carriage shadows, softly padded carriages, lined with rice paper, pulled by near-silent attendants. You climb into one. Inside it's dark, but not empty. There's a note, folded. You open it. A line of verse. We saw the same moonlight in different spoons. There's no signature. You smile. You lean back. The carriage moves. Outside the city breathes again. Lanterns flicker. Street vendors clean their stalls. Crickets chirp behind stone walls. A cat darts across a rooftop, unseen by all but you. You think about everything you didn't say, everything you couldn't say, everything you folded into a smile, a nod, a silence held between chopsticks. And you realize the banquet never really ends. Not in your body, not in your posture, not in your dreams. You'll wake tomorrow and still carry it, in how you bow, in how you speak, in how you look at a dish of plain rice, and remember even that has rules. Morning arrives like silk, quiet, soft, and slightly creased. Your legs ache, your back whispers betrayal, and somewhere deep in the theater of your bones, your kneecaps file official complaints to the Ministry of Standing Still Too Long. But you're awake, and you've survived. The banquet is over, but you are not finished. Because now comes the part that no one talks about, the post-banquet etiquette review. Yes, it's real. An entire bureaucratic substructure exists purely to analyze, interpret, and evaluate the behavior of each guest. They call it harmony oversight. You call it a long week ahead. You stretch cautiously. You're still in your underrobe, the main outer layers having been steamed, folded, and taken away last night by a servant who refused to meet your eyes. That's part of the protocol. Eye contact after a banquet is discouraged until sunrise. You open your door and find a scroll on your threshold. Of course, it's from the Office of Ritual Conduct, inside your preliminary banquet assessment score. Not a number, no, a phrase. Yours reads, "Observed stillness with notable echo." You're not sure what that means. It could be good. It could be very bad. You've heard stories of people receiving chewed without full reflection, or worse, held chopsticks with personal agenda. One unlucky fellow once got stirred tofu emotionally. He moved provinces. But your scroll contains a second part, a required response. Yes, you must now write a thank you commentary scroll to the banquet officials. It must include a reflection on the significance of at least one course, a metaphor involving the moon, an indirect compliment to the emperor's taste, one sentence that uses the word steam symbolically, and no personal opinions, only poetic objectivity. You sigh. You reach for your brush. You begin. The broth of remembrance still lingers, even as the moon retreats into parchment-colored daylight. Not bad. You continue. By noon, the scroll is finished, sealed, and placed into the lacquered drop box at the edge of the noble quarter. A servant in gray retrieves it without speaking. Naturally, you're told your full evaluation will arrive in 5 days, carved onto sandalwood. Until then, life resumes, almost. You attend court. You bow when needed. You sign forms about irrigation and peach taxes. But everywhere you go, people glance. Not obviously, not rudely, just enough. Because everyone knows who was at the banquet. And they want to know, did you frown at the tofu properly? Did you overreact to the eel? Did you pause too long at the emperor's spoon? They never ask. But you hear it in the way they say, good morning, slightly, measured, as if searching your tone for plum wine residue. Meanwhile, whispers circulate. Apparently a noble 2 tiers above you choked on the duck tendon. Someone else was accused of insincere jasmine chewing. And there are rumors that the Empress's cousin received 3 custards instead of 2. The implications vast. You retreat to the library, not to read, though you do admire a good scroll on grain yields, but to locate the banquet archive scrolls. Yes, they exist. Every banquet in recorded history has been archived, coded, categorized, and translated into acceptable moral takeaways. You find a scroll titled Notes on the Silverfish Banquet of year 479. A guest was expelled mid-course for offering unsolicited chopstick commentary. Another accidentally referenced the emperor's posture in a verse and was reassigned to spiritual counseling duty in a mountain temple. You close the scroll. You feel better. Your own errors, if any were minor. You hope. Then 5 days later, the sandalwood arrives. A slim plank polished to a soft shine, carried in a red pouch tied with yellow thread, signifying moderate clarity. You untie the knot. The inscription reads, "Your stillness honored the broth. Your nods maintained the table's integrity. Your words created gentle steam. You are welcome again." You exhale, a real honest exhale. That's a good result, better than most. You are now officially in the eligible to return category. It means that should another banquet be held within the next 2 years, you may be invited again, not guaranteed, but permitted. You place the sandalwood plaque in its designated place on your shelf, just above the inkstone, just below the scroll, labeled 7 Things I Did Not Say at the chili dish. You sit. You pour tea. And now, days later, you do something no one talks about. You open your personal journal the one with no etiquette, no metaphors, no required verses. And you write, the cherry was the best thing. I almost cried at the custard. I hated the eel. I loved the silence. I survived the soup. You close the book. You smile. And you remember, banquets are not just events. They're seasons. And this one will live in you for many more to come. You've written the truths you couldn't say aloud. The ones not wrapped in metaphor, not delivered through bowed posture or spoon gestures, just ink on paper. No audience, no fan. And now life flows back into its old channels. Except, of course, not really. Because after a banquet, the court watches you differently, not suspiciously, but attentively. There's a subtle glow that clings to those who have knelt beneath 100 lacquered bowls and passed the tests of frown and silence and one-sentence insight. So now when you enter a meeting on anything from canal policy to peony procurement, people nod with slightly more interest. They assume you carry experience, not power necessarily, but endurance, which is in this world often more impressive. Still, one thing remains. The return banquet review. Yes, weeks after the event, all surviving guests, those who did not faint, offend, or relocate themselves to mountain hermitages, are invited to a small follow-up gathering known as the Echo Table. It's not a banquet. It's more like an academic debrief with soup. You receive your invitation in the usual way, a folded red envelope placed under your door, scented faintly with sandalwood and stern expectation. Inside 4 words, you are still remembered. That's either very good or very worrying. You attend. The Echo Table is held in a smaller pavilion far from the grand halls. No jade tiles, no musicians, just 10 cushions, a round table, and 1 scroll laid at each place. The scroll contains your behavior transcript. Yes, the banquet had scribes. Dozens. You unroll your scroll. It's mercifully brief. Observation guest maintained appropriate nod frequency. Noted hesitation at course 43. Commendable chopstick alignment. Wine sip cadence smooth. Volume of closing breath within standard. You nod. Of course you do. Then a facilitator, someone with the title Sub-Coordinator of Ritual Analysis, speaks in a voice like well-oiled hinges. Each of you, he says, has carried the banquet well. A pause. But some moments require refinement. He gestures toward the center of the table, where small plates are revealed under woven lids. Each one contains a sample dish from the banquet. The revisit round. Course 31, Course 54, Course 70. They want you to experience them again now, with awareness, with memory, with reflection. You begin. The lotus seed custard, still gentle, still forgiving, but now you taste it differently. You understand the pause it created, the lull between chaos and order, how it positioned your heart for the emperor's spoon. You write this down. They nod. You move on. The chili plum citrus explosion, course 54. Even now, it burns. But you realize something: the pain was never the point. It was the silence after that made you strong. You sip water. You write. Fire teaches the shape of stillness. The facilitator smiles. Next, the dish you feared most. 70. The Emperor's Reflection. Soup. This time when you sip the chrysanthemum broth, your chest doesn't ache. It opens, because now you remember everything it stood for. How the broth tasted like restraint. How the golden egg threads represented roads you would never walk. How you nearly cried, but didn't. You write a bowl of almosts. The room goes still. That phrase will likely appear in next year's banquet training scrolls. And just like that, you understand the banquet never ends. It changes form. It becomes memory, then metaphor, then teaching. You eat the last spoonful, you bow, and now the guest survey. Oh yes, even imperial banquets have feedback forms. Yours includes such questions as, which dish most expanded your understanding of restraint? Rate your confidence in dumpling-based social maneuvers 1 to 5. Did you experience unauthorized emotion during tofu presentation? You answer honestly. Yes, absolutely. Finally, the facilitator speaks one last time. He says, each of you is now considered echo-trained. You may be called upon to guide first-time guests. Your stomach drops. You've just been unofficially drafted as a banquet mentor. This comes with no title, no sash, and no real power, only responsibility. From now on, if a guest 2 cushions down holds their chopsticks upside down, you are expected to gently nudge them with a metaphor. If someone frowns at the fish, you offer a subtle nod of realignment. You are now part of the banquet's living scaffolding. Congratulations. Yes, it's a strange honor, but you accept it because you remember what it was like to enter those jade doors, robe trembling, unsure if your dumpling nods were too eager. Now you know. You will pass it on. You exit the pavilion. The sun is low. You walk slowly. You don't bow at trees anymore, but part of you still checks for dragon tiles. You're a banquet survivor. But more than that, you're now a bearer of its echo. The wind shifts as you walk back through the outer gardens, slightly stronger now, like a breath released from centuries of ritual. You pause beneath a flowering plum tree. It's not blooming yet, but you know it will, because everything about you, from your gait to your gaze, now carries the rhythm of something endured. The banquet changed you. And that's the thing no one tells you. It always does. You begin to notice it in small ways. At breakfast, when you lift your bowl of congee with both hands without thinking. When you pause before sitting automatically, folding your sleeves back with care. When someone at court makes a sloppy metaphor about wind, and you flinch ever so slightly. The banquet is in you now, and not just in the formal gestures. It lives in how you speak, how you wait, how you listen for silence before you respond. One afternoon, you're summoned quietly, always quietly, to a meeting in the East Library. A junior official is preparing for their first banquet. They've been given your name as someone who can help. You're not thrilled, but you go. They ask the usual questions. What if I drop a spoon? What if the emperor looks at me? What if I don't feel anything at the tofu course? You answer patiently. You describe the 3-sip wine rule. You remind them to smile at fish, but not to enjoy it too much. You explain how to survive course 54 without breathing fire through your ears. They take notes, but they ask one more thing, something no scroll ever covers. They say, "Did you feel seen?" You pause. You remember the cherry. You remember the jasmine. You remember the single glance from the woman 2 cushions over during the surprise dish. And you say, not by everyone, but yes, once, quietly. They bow to you, not because of your title, but because you've been to the middle of the banquet and returned intact. Later that night you walk home by the North Canal. Lanterns sway over the water. The reflection of the palace blurs gently on the ripples. You pass a merchant slurping noodles. No fan, no scroll, no rhythm. You smile. He grins at you through sesame sauce and says, "Want some?" You almost decline, then pause and say yes. "Thank you." You sit on a low stool. He hands you a bowl. It's hot, messy, perfect. You raise it in both hands. He laughs. "You eat fancy, huh?" You laugh too. You eat. You slurp. No etiquette, no jade. But still, some part of you counts the chews. When you finish, you offer him a simple line. This tastes like memory before it's been written. He blinks, then grins wider. You're one of those court types. You nod once, grateful. Because even now, you carry the banquet. Not to perform, not to impress, but because it taught you how to hold things carefully, intentionally, as if everything mattered. Because sometimes it does. Sometimes a cherry is just a cherry. Sometimes a dumpling is destiny. And sometimes silence is the most nourishing course. You thank the man. You walk on. And in your pocket your fingers brush the jade token again. Received. You still are. And tomorrow someone else will be too. You wake to rain. Not the dramatic kind. No thunder, no imperial symbolism. Just a soft, persistent drizzle that turns the courtyard stones glossy and makes the world smell like old bamboo and washed ink. You sit beneath the eaves wrapped in a gray robe, sipping tea that's gone lukewarm, and you feel it again, that quiet weight of having attended something immense, something ceremonial, something designed to unfold slowly like a fan being opened, not to cool, but to say, "I am here." And now comes the final task, not written in scrolls, not enforced by eunuchs, but universally understood by everyone who's ever left a court banquet upright. You must digest. Literally, yes, 80 courses do not simply vanish, but also metaphorically. You begin with the simplest thought I was there. You recall the seating mat that didn't cushion much, the dumpling that arrived with no warning, the chili that nearly broke your spirit, the silence held and folded 100 different ways. You take a breath and try to list the courses. You lose count, around the 40s. Doesn't matter. You remember the way the candlelight curved around the edges of the emperor's spoon, the way a stranger's nod carried more approval than 1,000 words, the way tofu taught you restraint and fish demanded your joy. And now, as the rain thickens just slightly, you begin the slow, necessary act of re-entry back into your life, back into the ordinary. Except the ordinary no longer feels so plain, because now even the way you hold your cup has weight. Not heaviness, but meaning. You lift it, not for thirst, but with awareness. The way you sat in front of that bowl of Phoenix egg custard, you'll never sit the same again. A servant arrives with messages. You wave them away. You want this moment, to remember what it was like to be inside something so meticulously constructed, so quietly demanding, so unapologetically ceremonial, that it erased your name and replaced it with guest. And yet, that guest learned something. You learned how to wait, how to bow without collapsing, how to express gratitude without words, how to let food speak for politics, how to chew without emotion, and also sometimes how to chew with it. You remember course 70 again, the reflection dish. You didn't know it then, but that broth was saying goodbye. Goodbye to the part of you that wanted certainty, because a banquet like that doesn't offer certainty. It offers shape, structure, containment. And within that, if you're careful, if you're lucky, you might find freedom. The rain has stopped. You step outside. The flagstones are slick. A plum blossom has fallen onto the steps early, pale perfect. You don't pick it up. You simply bow very slightly and keep walking. The path before you is yours again. But your footsteps will always remember jade. And now the banquet fades. The lanterns have dimmed. The bowls have been stacked. The chopsticks laid to rest. The corridors swept, the scrolls tucked into shelves, the fans stilled beside walls that will not speak of what they saw. You are no longer seated on the embroidered mat, but the echo of it remains in the stillness of your breath. And the cherry yes, that final cherry is still there, not on your tongue, but somewhere deeper. You did it. You survived the silences, the tofu, the tearful dumpling, the single nod that meant I see you, even if no one else said it. So now you let your shoulders soften. Let your hands unclasp. Let the rhythm of the banquet dissolve like sugar in tea. You are not being watched anymore. There are no more etiquette scrolls waiting for your signature. No feathers, no bowls, just the quiet of your room and the gentleness of your body saying, That was a lot. But you did it. So wherever you are curled in bed, earphones and listening to this beneath soft blankets or a whirring fan, know this, you are allowed to let go now. The dishes are done. The verses sung. You are not a guest anymore. You are simply you, and that is more than enough. So close your eyes. Let the banquet slip quietly into memory. Let sleep arrive without needing permission. Let silence carry you. You're home now.